Hey there, YouTube. Please help us out. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tap that little bell. That way you get notified every time we go live. We're recapping Wednesday's action and taking a look at rankings movers. Up next, make that 24 more swinging strikes for Spencer Strider, who is pretty awesome. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, June 16th. Frank Stampfl joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, a couple more massive offensive outputs, pitchers that return, pitchers that confuse me. There's a lot that confuses me, but these pitchers, I've got a trio that I want to talk about. Rankings, risers, and fallers, and much more. But let's jump right in.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Oh my goodness gracious. Chris, who will be the Olive Garden breadstick for you tonight?
Well, yeah, I think this is the Olive Garden breadstick, that extra Olive Garden breadstick, obviously, and it's Spencer Strider, like you mentioned in the top of the show. 24 swinging strikes, 11 strikeouts, and 5 2/3 innings against the Nationals. Was pretty dominant, and only 2 walks, which is a big deal because that's been, if you had to find, one potential flaw for him so far this season, it's the walk rate, but that's 3 straight starts now with 2 or fewer walks. And that's potentially really big if he could sustain that, because this fastball slider combination is really a 2-pitch pitcher, but he's just dominating with them. 10 swinging strikes with the slider today, 12 with the fastball. Actually got 2 with the changeup on only 4 of them, which maybe he could throw that pitch even more. But yeah, he's when he's on, he's pretty devastating. There are, as I said, there have been times when the control hasn't been as good, and I think that can be a concern moving forward for him, but he looks pretty good. He's, we're going to talk about some rankings, risers, and fallers a little later on, and I think he's probably going to need to be a riser for everyone.
Rightfully so. Before I analyze his performance today and on the season thus far, can we just take a look at Spencer Strider, the person, Chris, because he kind of looks like a cartoon character. Not that, whatever. I'm no Adonis. Like, who am I to call out anyone how they look, right? But Spencer Strider, you just look at the guy. In his face, looks like a boy. Has this awesome mustache. And then he has these quads that are like massive. Something you would see on like a running back that, people would drool over like running back thighs and quads like this time of year. That's Spencer Strider. So I don't know how I figured this out, but I was making the thumbnail for YouTube and I was like, wow, Spencer Strider is like an interesting looking dude. I don't know if you ever thought about it, Chris.
Yeah, running back quad watch is one of my favorite recurring bits in the fantasy football world, and yeah, Spencer Strider's got some good ones. He's got some ham hocks. I think that's what you could refer to them as, right?
I feel like I've heard that word before, but if you said it outside of that context, I wouldn't be able to tell you what body part it was. So yeah, we'll go with that. Anyway, Spencer Strider, the pitcher, he's been great so far. His 4 starts since moving into the rotation, 2.81 ERA, 31 strikeouts over 19 2/3 innings pitched. He had a 15.7% swinging strike rate entering Wednesday's action. That's obviously just going to go up. I will point out this was a Juan Soto-less Washington Nationals lineup, so it was truly a fantastic matchup. So I guess you take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but it's awesome.
He's made 4 starts in the rotation. At Arizona, great matchup, great park to pitch in. At Colorado, tough matchup, tough park to pitch in. He wasn't great, although only give up 1 earned run in 4 innings. Versus the Pirates, versus the Nationals. So, it's been a pretty soft schedule for him since going to the rotation, and maybe that's coloring, and maybe that's something to keep in mind to temper expectations, but I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to temper expectations. He's so much fun.
Mm-hmm. And I've mentioned this before. I always reference Tyler Glasnow, right? It's you don't want to rely on just 2 pitches. And I think Glasnow, when he broke out, he even started throwing a 3rd pitch. But when your 2 pitches are this good, you can kind of get away with it. When you throw 98 miles per hour and you have a wipeout slider, you can kind of make do. It's, Chris Paddock was a little bit different a couple of years ago. He had that awesome changeup, but he wasn't overpowering the way that some of these other pitchers are. So someone like Strider, I think he can get away with it. He's 73% rostered. That number just needs to be higher. Like, we're talking universally rostered to happen for Strider, and he will be tested more next week. He's in line for 2 starts as of now. Looks like the Giants and the Dodgers. So a little bit tougher matchups there. We'll see what Spencer Strider can do.
But
I do have some concerns, Chris, just later on in the season. Is he on an innings limit at some point? Do they kind of bring him back into the bullpen? But I think we worry about that when we get there, and he just needs to be rostered right now.
That's where the fact that he was in the bullpen early on, does help him a little bit, because we've got a little over 3.5 months left in the season. So you figure that's probably, I don't know, 18 starts, let's say. Yeah, that's probably around, right? 18, 19 starts, depending on how the rotation, maybe they could make it more like 17 if they skip him a few times. And let's say he averages 5 2/3 innings per start. I'm not going to give him 6, but that's like 90-ish innings, I want to say, for the rest of the season, which would get him to about 130. He threw 94 last year. So it's entirely conceivable that Spencer Strider could be more or less a full-time starter the rest of the season and not have to worry about innings.
All right. Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, I know that, what's his name? Starting pitcher, Achilles, Mike Soroka. He's trying to work his way back, and I don't know that we'll get anything from him, but if they want to play it cautious, they could go 6-man later on in the season as well. Oh my goodness gracious, for me, I saw the chat on YouTube talking beforehand. Like, it kind of wasn't the easiest night for oh my goodness outside of Spencer Strider. And I'm choosing to go with John Berti, who I believe needs to be added in category leagues, specifically if you need steals. So he went 2 for 4 on Wednesday with 2 more stolen bases. He's now up to 14, which is tied for 4th most in baseball. And he only became a full-time player like 3 weeks ago. So every time this guy is on base, he has the green light. He's been relatively successful throughout his career stealing bases before. And I kind of just think the Marlins are going to let him go. He's got 3 different eligibilities, second, third, and outfield. He's playing every day right now, 19% rostered. I don't think he's a must-add, Chris, but I think that there are more than 19% category leagues on CBS, and he probably should be rostered in all of those.
He should probably be rostered in every categories league. It's really hard to find stolen bases right now, and he's kind of doing like a poor man's Tommy Edman right now, and the underlying numbers suggest that he's been a decent hitter so far this season. He's a 351 WOBA, 352 expected WOBA. Strikes out a little too much for a guy who doesn't hit for any power, really, but he walks, he gets on base, and he does a lot when he gets on base. So I think any roto or categories based league, especially if you need stolen bases, he's definitely a must roster player. I will say, if Spencer Strider is the breadstick of the never ending soup salad and breadsticks that is, oh my goodness gracious, John Berti's probably the salad.
Yeah.
Like you're happy to have it there, but that's not the attraction. You're mostly there, at least for me. I'm mostly there for the breadsticks.
Oh, I mean,
the soup, I like an Italian wedding soup.
Yeah.
But the breadstick is the clear star.
Let's be honest here, right? No one else listening or watching, like, we're there for the breadsticks. There's no doubt about it. And look, John Berti, there might be, 1 or 2 people at the table who like salad or who want the salad. That's John Berti. So you need steals, you need salad, go add John Berti. I will point out that Tyler Anderson could be the oh my goodness gracious player for tonight, but we'll keep you updated. He's currently throwing a did he just give up a hit now? No, he did not. So he's currently throwing a no-hitter, 7 2/3 innings into that start right now. He has 111 pitches. So, I think
probably not.
Yeah. I mean, that would be like the most Dave Roberts thing ever to take Tyler Anderson out. But oddly enough, between innings, they show him he keeps like rubbing his forearm and his triceps, and that seems really bad for someone who is trying to throw a no hitter. And
maybe it's a good luck. Maybe that's just his good luck forearm. Like, you know, some people rub a lucky rabbit's foot. Maybe it's, you know, I don't know.
We'll keep you updated on what happens with Tyler Anderson. Oh my goodness gracious, offense for the day goes to the Padres. They put up 19 runs on 21 hits. They have been scoring a good amount of runs in the series against the Cubs. And guess what? Now they're going out to Coors Field for the weekend. So I hope you started your Padres this week because they are on fire.
Yeah, I did not start Jake Cronenworth.
Ooh.
Feeling pretty dumb about that one. He's up to, 18 RBI in 15 games so far in June?
Yeah, he is on fire right now. I actually thought about adding Nomar Mazara in my deeper leagues solely because of this week's schedule. Cubs pitching and Coors Field. It's just a match made in heaven. Machado went 3 for 4, hit his 11th home run. I thought he had more home runs than that, but I think he has slowed down quite a bit. Manny Machado, he's still awesome, but he slowed down a little bit, which makes sense. Luke Voigt went 3 for 5, hit his 8th home run. Might have been listening yesterday to Scotty, who said he would take Nathaniel Lowe over him. Luke Voigt, if you need a first baseman or corner infielder, he's getting hot again. Jake Cronenworth, 3 more hits. Jurickson Profar, 3 more hits. He's been very good over the past month or so. The one I wanted to highlight here, Chris, Jorge Alfaro, 3 for 6 with his 5th home run. And over his last 10 games, you know, I always write this in where I'm supposed to update it afterwards, and I just never do it. And it's very frustrating. But he was 11 for 33 entering Wednesday over his last 9 games.
And I can do the math on that one. That's a 333 batting average.
That is a 3. You're right. So now he has 3 home runs over his last 10 games. He's hitting the ball extremely hard, which is something he has always done.
Always has.
Still striking out a lot, but the ground ball rate is down to a career low 41%. And that was always a big issue for Jorge Alfaro. He's playing more recently. He started 5 of their last 8 games. I realize most people listening, you probably don't need a catcher. But if you play in a 2-catcher league, I think he's kind of interesting. And he's only 8% rostered.
Yeah, I mean, the strikeout rate is really high, but the quality of contact has always been quite good for him. And, I mean, you look at the expected WOBA on contact. For his career, it's 440. And that's for a guy who has, like you said, hit way too many ground balls. His average launch angle is 5.4 degrees. It's up to 10.8 so far this season. He's got a 468 expected WOBA on contact. So, you know, the bar is low enough at catcher that you can be a viable fantasy option, even if you strike out 35% of the time. Mike Zunino's done it before. So Alfaro has always run high batting averages on balls in play. He's got some real pop. He's very fast, actually 90th percentile sprint speed.
Wow. That is so interesting.
Jorge Alfaro might be like the toolsiest catcher in baseball. And he's got a cannon arm. He's super athletic. He's never been able to put it together. And maybe he is. And in a 12-team 2-catcher league, I think that's enough to make him at least worth looking at.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in that, Cal Raleigh, Christian Betancourt conversation where those are the fringe top 25, top 30 catchers. So if you need a second catcher, Alfaro is doing some interesting things right now. Honorable mention to the White Sox, who destroyed the Tigers so bad that the Tigers had to have a team meeting after this game. That's how bad they got.
My favorite detail of that is AJ Hinch, Tigers manager?
Yep.
Said he didn't like that he had to use 3 position players to pitch today, which is like I think you should leave guy in the hot dog suit saying we're all trying to find the guy who did this of managerial comments. Cause, my guy, you're the one who put those position players in. Yeah. You got 13 pitchers on your roster. You could have used them.
I mean, I get why teams do it when they're getting blown out, right? Like you want to save your bullpen arms for more competitive games. I have absolutely no issue with it. Actually thought it was pretty cool that Roger Clemens' son, who is a position player wound up pitching an inning in that game. So obviously it's interesting for its own reasons. But anyway, the White Sox, they put up 13 runs on 22 hits in this game. Jose Abreu went 4 for 5 with 2 doubles, 2 RBI. His June continues to be scorching. Andrew Vaughn hit 3 more, had 3 more hits in this game. And then a massive game for Yoan Moncada, who hopefully uses this game to get back on track. I was going to mention later on that my fallers, I dropped Moncada quite a bit in the third base rankings because, frankly, he has done nothing this year, really has not done anything the past couple of years. And then he just goes out there and has this awesome game where he goes 5 for 6, hit a homer, a double. He had 5 RBI, truly just an awesome game. But I mean, Chris, is it enough to, I don't know, maybe hold on to Moncada if you were thinking about dropping him?
Sure. Yeah. I think that you were looking for any signs of life, and he showed some. The most promising thing here for me with Moncada is 3 of his hits came on fastballs, and he had been really, really struggling against fastballs so far this season. I'm looking up the numbers right now. 215 WOBA against fastballs this season, which is actually better than it was against breaking balls and off-speed pitches, but still, you're supposed to hit fastballs. That's the easier thing to hit. 26% whiff rate. I mean, he has looked, pretty overmatched so far this season. So I think this is a good sign. It definitely doesn't mean that he's back to being that 2019 level player that he was, but I think it's enough to stave off the drop-o-meter for now.
Since the start of the 2020 season, and you might remember that he either had COVID in that season or right before that season, and he mentioned that it's something that he was battling all of the shortened season. He really hasn't been the same since then. I don't want to speculate that whatever he has lasting effects or whatever it might be, but you just look at that and he really has not been the same since. So since the start of the 2020 season, Moncada is batting .239 with a .724 OPS. I mean, that's about as replaceable of player that you can be, especially when you're not contributing power and you're not contributing steals. So I wouldn't fault anybody for wanting to drop Moncada. I think in deeper leagues, I might still try to hold on, 15 teamers, stuff like that, see if this is something that can get him back on track. But it's been a real rough go the past couple of years for Yoan Moncada. Some pitching returns we, of course, have to talk about. Jack Flaherty made his season debut against the Pirates, and it was a mixed bag. I know, Chris, you're not really looking at results much when someone is returning after a long layoff like this, but he gave up 4 runs, 2 of those earned over 3 innings pitched. His fastball velocity was down 1.4 miles per hour compared to where he was at last season. And that's within the range that, you can build up over your next couple of starts. So I'm not overly concerned about that. His pitch mix was pretty normal. Didn't allow that much hard contact. I think it was, all in all, it was okay. It was a mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a nice soft landing to get to go against the Pirates in your first game back when you don't necessarily have all your stuff there. Although, remember, he was supposed to have at least one more rehab start, and they accelerated his timetable because he, said he felt so much better and the stuff looked good. And so it's a little bit concerning that this was what, they determined to be, his stuff looked so good. But, it's still early. Like, this is still, his 4th or 5th start, I think. So you're still talking about opening day, maybe, relative to where most pitchers would be. If you count the rehab starts as like a spring training kind of thing. So it's much too small of a sample size to draw many conclusions from. But it wasn't, I don't feel great about Jack Flaherty as a result of this.
Sure. Would you start him next week? It looks like he's in line for 2 starts against the Cubs and at the Brewers.
I'd be fine with that. Yeah. I don't think he's a must start, but I think he's a viable 2-start option.
All right. Sonny Gray was the other pitcher who made a return to the mound on Wednesday. He was solid at the Mariners, 5 shutout innings with 3 hits, 0 walks, 3 strikeouts, only had 5 swinging strikes, also only threw 65 pitches, but he was pretty efficient and effective in this start. He lowered his four-seam usage in this one. He used a lot more breaking pitches, his slider, and his curveball. And Sonny Gray has been very good when he's pitched this year. 2.09 ERA, 3.13 xFIP, and the walks being down has been massive for him. 2.3 walks per nine. And something I've always said, Chris, about Sonny Gray is he doesn't get enough strikeouts to mitigate the amount of walks that he has. And he's like been consistently over 3 walks per nine. He gets a good amount of strikeouts, but I always felt that way about him. If he can keep the walks down, I feel like maybe we can see, one of the better versions of Sonny Gray.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him is you look at the expected ERA over the last 4 seasons, 3.56, 3.90, 3.25, 2.90. That's quite good. I mean, it's not ace level production, and especially given that he's dealt with injuries and he doesn't necessarily pitch deep into games all the time. There's a limitation to how useful he can be, but I'm viewing him as, I don't know if it's must start, but a very solid starting pitcher moving forward.
What does that look like in the rankings, Chris? Like top 60?
I think he's in the 60 range for me. Let me make sure, but I think that's where I had him. I had him 80, but that was, with the injury, so there's plenty of room for him to move up.
Yeah, I remember.
I'll move him to 61.
I remember when he returned last time and he had a really good start. I was like, yeah, man, like you got to move Sonny Gray up. When he pitches, he's typically pretty good. I got him up around, my 50th starting pitcher range before, but I dropped him back down because of injury. So he will be someone who is moving back up the rankings. Let's just hope that Sonny Gray can stay healthy. That's been a big issue for him. Speaking of rankings, let's take a look. Some rankings, risers and fallers. We'll start with the risers for Chris. Shane McClanahan. You know his name, Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go.
Money talk. Here comes the money.
Shane O'Mac, by the way, tough loss on Wednesday. He gave up 4 runs, but only 1 earned. A brutal error in the outfield where Brett Phillips just dropped a fly ball, extended the inning. We wound up giving up a 3-run homer to Kyle Higashioka. Still, turned out to be a quality start overall. And Tyler Anderson just lost his no-hitter with 1 out in the 9th inning to Shohei Ohtani, who is about to have a triple. All right, so we'll talk about Tyler Anderson in a little bit, but a near no-hitter for him. Other risers for Chris: Christian Walker, Nico Horner, Adolis Garcia, Tony Gonsolin, and David Bednar. Chris, I'll give you the opportunity to talk about whoever you want. But first, I feel like we need to talk about Tony Gonsolin, who we didn't get to on yesterday's podcast. And someone tweeted at us that
it's just our East Coast bias.
Yes, that we were purposely overlooking Tony Gonsolin. We do this podcast very late at night, like usually while the West Coast games are, in the 7th, 8th, 9th innings, they're wrapping up. But it's hard. It's hard to, pay attention to what's happening and obviously pay attention to the rundown. So no, we did not overlook Tony Gonsolin purposely. But what would you like to say about him, Chris? Because he is the current ERA leader in Major League Baseball, and he's been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he's been awesome pretty much whenever he's been in the rotation for the Dodgers. It hasn't been consistent enough over the years to really matter, but he's got a 2.41 career ERA. Now, only 208 strikeouts in 205 innings. Not quite elite.
That's still very good over a strikeout.
It's good, but it's not, 2.41 in ERA in 205 innings. That sounds like the best pitcher in baseball. He's not that, but he's a good strikeout pitcher who has iffy control at times, but 8.3% walk rate right now. That's perfectly acceptable. And he's done a really good job of limiting quality of contact. 335 expected WOBA on contact for his career. That's very good. He's also been someone who's outperformed his peripherals consistently. It's only 205 innings. That's not enough to say that he has a consistent skill when it comes to that, but I don't know. He does a lot of the things that you want a starting pitcher to do. So yeah, I think Tony Gonsolin, I'm moving him up to, where did I move him up to? Yeah, 46. That's too low. I got to move him up higher than that. I moved him right behind Mackenzie Gore, and that's making me think maybe I just had Mackenzie Gore too low. So
Yeah.
I'm moving them up together to 30, 38 is where Tony Gonsolin's moving up, and that still feels too low.
Yeah, no, I think top 40 starting pitcher makes a lot of sense for Tony Gonsolin. As we've referenced many times, the 20 through 50 range of rankings is kind of this big glob that's hard to figure out and hard to differentiate. But specifically the 35 to 40 range for me, Yu Darvish, Jose Barrios, Carlos Carrasco, Eric Lauer, Chris Bassett. I feel like Gonsolin should be in that range, maybe even a little bit above that, but in that 30 to 40 range, I think makes a lot of sense for.
Absolutely. I think that's the right range.
All right. Anyone else you'd like to highlight from this list, Chris?
David Bednar is, I believe I saw he's averaging 4 innings per save or per outing this season. Or not, sorry.
4 outs per save?
4 outs per outing.
So he actually recorded the final 8 outs on Wednesday with 4 strikeouts for his 11th save.
That's massive.
That's great
for a catch or for a closer. He really, I mean, he gives up way too many fly balls, which is risky when you're a closer, especially because he doesn't get a lot of infield fly balls. So there's going to be some home run regression there. But man, he looks like an elite closer. 11.8 K per 9, 11.9 K per 9, under 2 walks per 9 innings. Yeah, he looks really, really good. It seems like a long time ago when we were not sure if Chris Stratton or David Bednar was the guy to go with. David Bednar clearly looking like a high-end reliever, and I've moved him inside my top 12 at relief pitcher. So I'm a big fan of his. Adolis Garcia we talked about. Christian Walker we've talked a lot about. And another guy that I'm going to add on the fly. And I want to see, let's talk it through, because we were talking a little bit about it before the show. Ryan Mountcastle. I've been very skeptical. I don't think I had him inside my top 60 outfielders coming into the season. I was wrong, I think. His quality of contact metrics are really, really strong across the board. He's looking like a guy that it's hard to say we overlooked because we talked about him a ton. It's more, he had 2 more home runs today. He's up to 12 for the season. It's more just looking flat out like we were wrong. Yeah. He's on another 30 homer pace. He's on a 80-ish RBI pace, which is a little disappointing. I don't know if that's really his fault. But yeah, quality of contact, expected batting average 313, expected slug 593. There are extenuating circumstances that can make you, I think, reasonably assume that he will underperform his expected stats, potentially by quite a lot, because everyone's underperforming their expected stats, and that gigantic outfield that they've got at Camden Yards now is going to make life more difficult for him, and it's going to turn home runs that in most parks, or balls that in most parks would be home runs, into doubles or even outs. And he doesn't pull the ball a lot this season, so that's going to limit some of that quality of contact as well. That's something that StatCast's expected stats doesn't take into account, is vertical or horizontal launch angle or whatever that would be, spray, I guess. But still, even if he underperforms his expected stats moving forward, 275 with 30 homers doesn't seem like an unrealistic expectation for him. And that's a lot better than I thought it would be. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, we were talking beforehand, and look, this was flat out a miss. Like we were anti, I would say as a podcast, we were just like the anti Ryan Mountcastle podcast.
100%.
If you think about it, I was trying to think more about the process today, and he was he was a decent prospect. And did I say prospect before? The process. I was thinking of the process. And he was a decent prospect, and he performed well in the minors, and he had a pretty good season last year. And, when you put all of that together, it doesn't really make sense that we were off of him. So yeah, I think it was just a miss, and he's playing very well. He hit 2 more homers on Wednesday. He's up to 12 home runs. And I mean, looking at outfield, talked about how it's kind of a wasteland. I think you can make the argument that he should be top 40, top 30.
I moved into my top 36. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think,
No,
right around like Ozuna and Jorge Soler, to me, that's a perfect place to have Ryan Mountcastle, in my opinion.
It's worth noting he had like a 715 OPS at the end of May. So this is also 6 home runs in 13 June games. He had a 692 OPS at the end of May. So this is very much a recent thing. He was not hitting for power. He has 6 home runs in 13 June games. He had 6 in the first 2 months of the season. So it's also possible that this is an overreaction to Ryan Mountcastle having a couple of good weeks. But the underlying numbers do suggest that he's been better than his performance.
You know what I've noticed recently, Chris? I will look at standouts at a certain position and notice OPS is low for like a lot of standouts.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
that's
it's weird.
League wide. Yeah.
It's just like a weird thing in general. Lindor, for example. I mean, he's kind of been the poster child for this. He's, I think, a top 2 or 3 shortstop this season, and he's got a sub 800 OPS.
Yeah. Well, OPS, Lindor is a good example of how OPS doesn't necessarily always translate to fantasy production, and I use it as a shorthand, for just how well a player's hitting. And in Mountcastle's case, that could potentially undervalue him for fantasy because he is a very low OBP guy.
Right.
He's hitting 268, 267, but he's got an OBP below 305. So like that's going to undervalue him because his game is almost entirely based on power and average, but it's still mostly just to point out that he's gone from a 690 to a 790 OPS in the span of 13 games, and that it's mostly just, we were singing a different tune 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, no,
and rightly so.
He's definitely on a hot streak right now. That is Ryan Mountcastle. A few risers for me. I didn't really have much this week. I'm actually still working through my starting pitcher ranks, but Dansby Swanson and Kyle Schwarber were 2 that moved up a little bit. Schwarber red hot right now in June, and Swanson, I want to move him higher because he's having this awesome season. I believe he's in a contract year. Did I make that up? Or maybe it's next year, but he's coming up on a contract soon. And I wrestle with, do we move Dansby Swanson ahead of established names like Carlos Correa and, Willie Adames, who's still been really good. And
yeah, Adames is an interesting one because he's not really established himself. If anything,
right.
Dansby Swanson is more established than Adames.
That's fair.
And Dansby Swanson's been better than Adames so far this season. Now, Adames, he's an interesting case because he's another one that the power has been there. He's got a 257 isolated slugging percentage with underlying numbers that are even better than that.
I think he's batting 205.
Yeah, 208 batting average, 27% strikeout rate. That's high, but not so high that it should be. He probably isn't a Mendoza line level hitter.
Right.
And so if he was hitting 255, we'd probably be talking about him as a top 10 shortstop. I don't think he's top 10 in either points or roto right now.
He had a few massive games, and he's missed some time with injury. This is Willie Adames we're talking about. So, I think Dansby Swanson is kind of working his way into that tier, and I think you can argue he should be ahead of them, but we'll see. A couple more weeks or months like this, and we're moving Dansby Swanson up. Some followers in the rankings for Chris: Yasmani Grandal, who is on the IL right now; Trevor Rogers, who has just been brutal; Eric Lauer. The velocity has come back down. The swinging strikes haven't been there the past month or so. And then Giovanni Gallegos, who now finds himself in a closer by committee for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I would say Rogers and Lauer are very disappointing for me. It's funny. I played softball with someone who's on a different team in one of my leagues, and he said, "Oh, I recognized you from a fantasy column that you wrote, telling me that I should pick up Eric Lauer." And I was like, sorry for the last few starts. I still have hope that he can be a useful fantasy option, but I had him as a top 40 option. I think he's more like in that 60 range now.
All right, fair enough. Some followers for me in the rankings. Whit Merrifield has slowed back down. His last 15 games, he's batting 250 with nothing else. 0 homers, 0 steals. I'm hesitant to not write him off, Chris, but kind of admit this might be the start of the decline, the downside of Whit Merrifield's career, because we thought that in April, and then he bounced back with like a pretty good May, and now he's slowed up again. But he is older. He's, in his low to mid 30s and never really hit for much power, always relied on volume. It wouldn't surprise me if this is just kind of the beginning of not the end, but that decline for Whit Merrifield.
Yeah, on the other side, though, the quality of contact metrics are actually a little better than last season. The expected WOBA is 329. The actual WOBA is 254. Even accounting for this offensive environment, I think that's a more steep decline. So I think it's not unreasonable to think he could hit more like he did last season, which was 278, 712 OPS, which would be a pretty dramatic improvement and would make him look a lot better. But the biggest concern here is just the stolen bases. He's only attempted 8 in 62 games. That puts him on pace for around 20 attempts. He had 15 attempts at basically the same point in that 2020 shortened season. He had 15 in 60 games. He's got 8 in 62. He's never had fewer than 30 in a full season. That was back in 2019. So he is someone, look, steals can come in bunches, right? We talked about John Berti having 14 steals in a month, basically. I don't think Whit Merrifield's going to do something like that, but it's not out of the question. He's still 84th percentile in sprint speed. That's a little down from last season, but not so alarming that you think he's just lost it. So I think Whit Merrifield's still a buy low, but yeah, you'd have to buy pretty low.
The other one is Nick Castellanos, and I didn't drop him tremendously. I dropped him down to around 20 or 21. He's consistently been right around 15 for me, so it's more so just other outfielders moving ahead of him. And I'm sure this means that he's going to, have a 3-homer game on Thursday or Friday, and
of course
make me look dumb. But what do you think about Castellanos, Chris? Because he goes 0 for 4 on Wednesdays, batting 253, 710 OPS. And outside of the 2 years in Cincinnati, he was not known for being a power hitter the way that he was in Cincinnati. And he did have drastic home road splits last year. He was awesome in Great American Ballpark, not so great outside of there. What do you think? Do you think Nick Castellanos gets back on track, or maybe just closer to the player he was back in Detroit?
Yeah, it's possible because he relies so much on hitting his home runs to the power alleys. And obviously, Great American Ballpark was a fantastic place for a guy with that profile to hit. And
Philly's pretty good, though, too.
Right, that's the thing. Is Philly's very good for that as well. Not quite as good, I don't think. But the one thing that I would argue, if I had to hypothesize why Nick Castellanos is underperforming so much right now, it's possible that those longer home runs, and especially the ones hit the opposite way, could be more impacted by a ball that's not traveling as far. We mentioned it the other day, but one of the things that has been studied this season is the effect of slicing spin on batted ball distance, and that would, at least in theory, impact balls hit the other way more. And so you just think of the way the trajectory works. So it's possible that he is especially impacted by a ball that doesn't travel as far, and you do see in his spray chart he only has 1 home run the opposite way and 1 to dead center. So maybe there's something there that he's more impacted by this than your typical hitter, but the quality of contact metrics are still really solid.
They are down a little bit.
Well, down a little bit, but yeah, but 352 expected WOBA within the league context, that's still very, very good. So I would still be trying to buy, and like I said, that's a hypothesis that might be worth looking into. And maybe I'll do that in the next couple of days. Try to see if maybe balls hit to the power alleys the other way are especially impacted this season. It's entirely possible they are. But based on the knowledge I have right now, I would still be trying to buy Nick Castellanos low.
I agree completely. And the key word is buy low. I'm not trying to pay the 4th or 5th round price tag that you paid on draft day, but if I can get him, for I don't know, a top 75 or a top 80 player, that's something I would look into doing. Quickly pulled up the park factors according to StatCast. So a 3-year rolling average, the past 3 years. Great American Ballpark is far and away the best ballpark for home runs. It's not close. I don't know how they judge this number, but they are 156 and the Dodgers are 129. Like, they are far and away the best home run ballpark. And then the Phillies are 10th on this list. So they're still good, but Cincinnati, I mean,
it could be the kind of thing where there's just like a little bit of a downgrade in park factor and in home park, and a little bit of the ball not traveling as far, and a little bit of the ball not traveling as far, especially for specific batted ball types. Like, it's possible that's the explanation. And if so, Castellanos could just fall into like a Goldilocks zone where he just everything is going wrong for him. But I wouldn't want to put too much weight on that until I have more evidence.
All right.
I think it's an interesting hypothesis, though.
So look to buy Nick Castellanos low while you can. Let's take a break, and when we return, we'll get to the news and notes here on Fantasy Baseball Today. The news and notes. Juan Soto has now missed 2 straight with that right knee soreness. X-rays came back negative, and it's not believed to be a serious injury. Brandon Woodruff will make a rehab start Saturday, so hopefully that numbness in his fingers has subsided a little bit. Maybe it's something he can pitch through. We will follow that closely. Starling Marte was hit by a pitch on his wrist, but X-rays came back negative. He is day-to-day. Ozzy Albies underwent successful foot surgery on Wednesday and will be out at least 2 months. Josh Hader was placed on the paternity list and will miss the next few days. Ketel Marte was removed on Wednesday with tightness in his hamstring. Freddie Peralta has resumed throwing and working out at the Brewers' extended spring training facility. He's not eligible to return until late July. Jeremy Pena was placed on the IL with left thumb discomfort, which is quite unfortunate because he's been one of the better stories in baseball this season. A few shortstop replacements. If you are looking at the waiver wire, Kyle Farmer has been surprisingly very good this season. Bryson Stott, who we've talked a lot about recently, and Luis Garcia, who hit another home run on Wednesday. Some closer news. Aaron Boone said Wednesday that he envisions using Clay Holmes in high leverage situations against the toughest parts of opposing lineups once Aroldis Chapman returns. Boone also clarified that Holmes will be, quote, closing some games too. Maybe it turns into a situation similar to the Cardinals, Chris, where, it's Gallegos and Helsley. I'm still leaning. I think Clay Holmes will get either 60-40 or 70-30. I still think he sees the majority of the save opportunities.
That would be my expectation.
He's just been so good. He's been ridiculous.
I struggle with it, though, just because we've seen stretches like this before where Aroldis Chapman has struggled or been hurt, and they've pulled him from the role, and they always go back to him. And I don't know if that's a temperament thing, if that's I could see Aroldis Chapman being the kind of guy who isn't going to settle for being a setup man the way Kenley Jansen didn't this free agency, and the way Craig Kimbrell hasn't seemed comfortable with when the White Sox tried it. I could see that being an issue.
It could. I think I saw a quote somewhere that Aroldis Chapman said he's willing to do whatever the team asks him to do. Everyone says that, right? Other big closer news. Corey Knebel has been removed from the closer's role for now. Brad Hand and Sir Anthony Dominguez are both expected to see save opportunities moving forward.
Dominguez by far the more interesting option.
Yeah, for sure. Brad Hand obviously has the experience, and the surface numbers are okay, but everything under the hood is pretty scary for Brad Hand. So Dominguez is the name to look at there. Andrew Heaney could return Sunday against the Guardians. He's 75% rostered and could be out there in some shallow leagues. So make sure to check your waiver wire. This one hurts, Chris, obviously for our Marlins, but also because I was very aggressive in adding Edward Cabrera in FAB, and he was placed on the IL due to right elbow tendonitis retroactive to June 13th. Look, anything elbow related sounds pretty bad. Tendonitis. I don't know. The fact that they mentioned that it's retroactive to another date leads me to believe maybe he won't be out so long. But I'm trying to see glass half full here, Chris.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Max Meyer, the Marlins' other top pitching prospect, is also dealing with an elbow injury. He has been ramping up, but he hasn't pitched in a game yet, so I don't think he's someone who's going to get called up. So not great. All of a sudden, that Marlins pitching depth not looking so great.
Man, a lot of my roto teams, Chris, they've done the switcheroo. So they got off to awful offensive starts.
Yeah.
When pitching was dominating, and now it's just going completely sideways. There's been so many injuries recently. Scherzer and Woodruff and Bueller, Edward Cabrera. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's been so many injuries to pitchers. So it's kind of hard right now. And another one, Drew Rasmussen placed on the IL with a left hamstring strain for Tampa Bay. Nick Lodolo will need 2 to 3 more rehab starts to build back up before coming off the IL for the Reds. He's pretty interesting, someone you can look to stash. Jarren Duran was recalled on Wednesday, and I believe I saw that he was leading off. I will confirm that. But he is only 17% rostered. They had Christian Arroyo placed on the COVID IL. I'm still intrigued, Chris, by Jarren Duran. I believe you are too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I have no idea if he's going to get the chance to stick around. They've teased us with like these 3-day stretches where Jarren Duran's on the roster. And I think last time, didn't he like hit leadoff in one of the games that he appeared in, and then they sent him right back down? So I don't know. Jarren Duran's still very good minor league numbers. Very good AAA numbers. He's a guy I remember who changed his swing last year, and there was a lot of hype. It was like in the 2020 season, he changed his swing. And he's played 103 AAA games. He's hitting 278 with an 889 OPS, 22 homers, 27 stolen bases. That is a very intriguing skill set. So just hope they let him have a chance this time.
All right. Yes, he did lead off recently when he was called up, and he led off again on Wednesday. Jesus Luzardo was transferred to the 60-day IL, which means he can't return until mid-July at the earliest. Josiah Gray's next start will come Saturday against the Phillies. He was scratched on Monday after a 90-minute rain delay. The Nationals have committed to Luis Garcia as their everyday shortstop moving forward, which is good for his playing time. We don't have to worry about that being in question. Trey Mancini's hand inflammation has subsided, and he hopes to return to the lineup on Friday. And James McCann will begin a rehab assignment at AA on Thursday. He's been on the IL for over a month due to a broken wrist. Some waiver wire hitters from Wednesday. Christopher Morel. We mentioned him a lot, but for good reason. He's been pretty good, and he went 2 for 5, hit his 4th home run. 70% rostered. The other day, this number was 73%. Someone somewhere is dropping Christopher Morel, Chris.
That doesn't make any sense.
I don't really understand that one myself. And I am looking at a few names that are rostered in more leagues than him. This is an interesting one. Would you drop Nolan Gorman for Morel? Gorman not playing against lefties.
Yeah, I think I would.
Slowed up a little bit. I think I would as well. So that's a move that you can make. Of course, Morel has second base and outfield eligibility. Welcome back to Brandon Belt, who hit a solo home run. He's still 74% rostered, so could be available in some shallower leagues. And whenever Brandon Belt plays, it seems like he's pretty awesome. So I would expect more of the same. Ahmed Rosario went 3 for 5 with a sock and a shoe in Coors Field. Helps out for sure. His first home run, his 6th stolen base. He's only 34% rostered. And it's been a pretty rough go so far this season, Chris. Rosario, someone who he gets hot, it seems like every year. I tell people to pick him up, and then by the time you pick him up, he starts to cool off again. Do you have any interest in adding Ahmed Rosario?
If he ran more, I think it would be worthwhile, but because he's a 97th percentile sprint speed guy, like it's entirely possible he could be a 25 steal guy, but he's on a 12 steal pace probably. And so that leaves him as a batting average specialist who hits 270.
Yeah.
So not particularly interesting.
I agree. In head-to-head points leagues, Brendan Donovan is an interesting player. 3 for 4 with a double, 2 RBI. He's batting .341 with a .913 OPS. He only has 1 homer. He only has 2 steals. So in category leagues, I think he might be kind of empty batting average, but in points leagues, he has 12 doubles. He has more walks than strikeouts. He has a near 28% line drive rate. He hits the ball to all fields. His 293 expected batting average is 89th percentile. And he is eligible at every position on CBS outside of catcher. First, second, third, shortstop, and outfield. He's 34% rostered. I don't know about a standard points league, Chris. 12 teams, just whatever. One of each infield position, 3 outfielders. But in any slightly deeper points leagues, I like Brendan Donovan. I think he's pretty good in this format. You are muted, sir.
I think that's interesting. The problem is your standard 12-team points league is 108 starting position players, right?
Yeah.
9 times 12, 108. That he's not one of the 110 best hitters in a points league, I would think.
Right.
And so, there are a handful of players who just kind of fall into that. Like, they're better in points leagues, but they're not good enough. And the eligibility could help him. Like, that's a really valuable thing to have, is a guy that you can just plug into your roster whenever, no matter what happens. But I'm not sure he's good enough to be much more rostered than he is.
I think daily lineup leagues, either categories or points leagues, because of that eligibility, you could just move this guy all around.
Yeah, like you just have one hitter on your bench, and it's him, and he just goes wherever someone's available. Yeah.
That is Brendan Donovan. A few reminders, those Atlanta Braves, I don't think they're ever going to lose again. That's 14 in a row. Michael Harris, 2 more hits for him. He's 52% rostered. I'm going to keep talking about Harris, big prospect, and has all this potential, and he's playing well. Orlando Arcia, another one I mentioned yesterday. This is solely for deeper leagues, but he went 4 for 4 with a walk. He hit another home run. His average exit velocity is 94.7 miles per hour. So he hasn't done much in his major league career. Frankly, I'm just kind of rooting for Orlando Arcia. I want him to be a thing.
Sure.
But yeah, he's a name in deeper leagues. Pitchers that confuse me, Chris. Let's run through these 3. Jose Barrios with another strong start up against the Orioles. 7 innings, 3 runs, 8 strikeouts. And over his last 6 starts, he looks a lot like Jose Barrios. 3.63 ERA, 38 strikeouts over 37 2/3 innings pitched. Zach Gallen gets back on track with a quality start. 7 innings, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts against the Reds. And then Luis Castillo goes a season-high 7 innings at the Diamondbacks, where he allows 3 runs, 6 strikeouts, 11 swinging strikes on 110 pitches. And his ERA thus far is 3.33. All these pitchers sound pretty good, except they're a little confusing. Barrios, the swinging strike rate is bad. It's very bad. It's 8.7% entering Wednesday. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe he's just so established, he'll find a way to work through it. Zach Gallen is another one, sub 10% swinging strike rate. And then Luis Castillo, his swinging strike rate and his strikeout rate are both career lows, but his numbers are okay. His underlying numbers, his xFIP is 3.6. That's perfectly fine for Luis Castillo. I don't know, Chris. Maybe I'm just making something out of nothing, but not great swinging strike rates for all 3 of these pitchers.
Yeah, Castillo's had 2 starts where the strikeouts really haven't been there. There was 1 2 strikeout game, another one 3. So I don't know if I'm too concerned with that in the small sample size that we're dealing with. Gallen looks like a sell high to me, given the injury concerns, the underlying numbers not being nearly as strong. He is someone who does benefit a little bit if you take into account quality of contact, because he's been very good in that regard so far this season. But right around an average strikeout rate, middling swing and miss stuff. I think Gallen, obviously with his injury history last season with the elbow, I think there's a chance that the bottom falls out any minute. And I think there's just a chance that the performance gets much worse. So he's someone I would be willing to start shopping. And then Barrios, getting annoyed with it. Jose Barrios when he's inconsistent is like staring at the sun and getting annoyed that it hurt your eyes. That's who he is, right? Like his career has been defined by these weird stretches where he just looks really hittable, and then these weird stretches where he looks awesome. And I think, there's an element of a random number generator to him. And, maybe it's like there's 8 numbers and 5 of them are good. And sometimes you just hit those 3, 4 or 5 times in a row. But I think all in all, he's going to be more good than bad.
I'll point out with this specific start against the Orioles, obviously pretty good matchup. He threw his curveball a season high 43%, and that is far and away his best pitch. 164,
Always has been.
164 batting average against 14% swinging strike rate. So if this is something he leans into more, I think we could see more swinging strikes and strikeouts for Jose Barrios. Some pitching leftovers, Chris. We'll do rapid fire. I'll mention a pitcher. If you have anything to say, we'll talk about it. If not, we'll move on. Kyle Gibson goes a season high 8 innings against the Marlins. So much for pointing out that they were great against right-handed pitching. 8 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts. He had 14 swinging strikes. Anything on Kyle Gibson?
I think he's a fringy guy.
Okay. Would you rather have Kyle Gibson or Martin Perez?
Martin Perez.
All right, fair enough. Luis Garcia gets back on track after a recent rough start. He goes 6 innings, 2 runs, 9 strikeouts. Really awesome from this game. 2 immaculate innings thrown in the same game. First time in MLB history. Luis Garcia and Phil Maton, they also did it against the same 3 batters.
That's wild.
Weird. Very weird. Anything on Luis Garcia?
No, I think he's pretty good.
He's awesome. And he's fun to watch because he rocks back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife was in South Florida and she was watching that game with her dad. And she texted me, I can't remember if she asked me who it was or what his deal was, but she said her dad hates the way he pitches. And I was like, oh, that's such an old man thing to say.
I get it. Marco Gonzalez turns in another quality start, 6 2/3, 1 run, 2 strikeouts. God bless Marco Gonzalez. I have no idea how he gets away with what he does, but he does it.
Nothing to say.
All right. Nestor Cortez with a solid bounce back up against Tampa Bay. 5 1/3, 1 run. He had 4 strikeouts, 13 swinging strikes, and the velocity was up 1 mile per hour on his fastball and cutter. Anything here?
I still think he's a sell high candidate. I think he's more like a mid-3s ERA guy. But I think he's also a solid, very useful starting fantasy pitcher.
Something I hadn't noticed with him, I know the first pitch strike percentage on Fangraphs is kind of weird. 72% first pitch strike percentage for Nestor Cortez entering Wednesday. That is amazing. So
maybe it's time we start swinging.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, no, seriously though, it's something that I could see maybe as the season goes on, opposing hitters know this and they jump on his first pitches more often.
Yeah. So. I mean, he's just, it's so hard. And I struggle with this because I admit he might just be a blind spot for me because I feel like he's just a gimmick.
Yeah.
And it could be the kind of thing that just gets figured out. But, we're going on a calendar year of him being this good. So it's I think he'll be worse than he has been. I don't think he's going to be I don't think this is an Eric Lauer situation where he's going to, stop being a starting option.
Mm-hmm. We were talking beforehand, Chris, and this time of year for me is reflection period. I'm looking back at my teams, my drafts. I'm trying to figure out, what I did wrong and what I did right. And I noticed a lot of the good teams in my leagues makes sense. They have Nestor Cortez. And I think at the end of your drafts, just kind of blindly taking pitchers on good teams, it might not be such a bad strategy. It's something we do in fantasy football too, right? Later on in your drafts, just take players on good teams and see what happens. Take pitchers on good teams. It might not be such a bad strategy. So it's something I got to look into more, but I noticed a lot of good fantasy teams have Nestor Cortez. Corbin Burns bounces back after a rough 2-start stretch. He goes 6 innings, 2 runs, 8 strikeouts, and the ERA is down to 2.52. Anything on Corbin Burns?
Him and Garrett Cole both bounced back. That's what the best pitchers in fantasy do.
That's what they do. Tyler Anderson, is he one of the best pitchers in fantasy? I don't know. But he almost threw that no-hitter, 8 1/3. He gave up 1 run, and he had 8 strikeouts. The ERA is down to 2.82. He had 13 swinging strikes on 123 pitches.
Yeah.
9 of those whiffs came on the changeup, which continues to look like just a remade amazing pitch.
Yeah. I'll caution that his next start, may not be a long one. I would bet against it actually because of the 123 pitches. I feel like when that happens, you'll often see teams give a guy a quick hook, and the Dodgers, especially seem likely to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he only throws 80 pitches next time out.
Mm-hmm. Chris, do you think that Tyler Anderson should be in that Tony Gonsolin kind of discussion, top 50, top 40-ish starting pitcher?
Top 50-ish, yes. Top 40-ish, no.
All right. So clearly a tier behind Gonsolin, but Tyler Anderson has been awesome. And regression alert, apologies to anyone who streamed Alex Faedo, because the underlying numbers never lie. And that's what happened in this start, where he gave up 7 runs, and I had him in a few lineups, and I feel pretty awful about it.
I don't see what you and Scott have seen in him.
Yeah, I think we were just kind of riding a hot hand, but every time I looked at it, the underlying numbers were so bad. And
he just doesn't get strikeouts, doesn't get enough whiffs outside of the slider. I just can't.
I mean, that is admittedly a fault of my own. I'll have pitchers who I know very clearly are out pitching what they should be doing, what their underlying.
Sure, but sometimes guys stay hot.
Yeah, I'll just continue to ride it out. And unfortunately, I did that a little bit too long with Alex Faedo. Some hitting leftovers from Wednesday. Adolis Garcia went 2 for 4 with his 10th stolen base. Aaron Judge, little MVP on Cy Young crime, maybe. Hit his 25th home run. It came off of my guy Shane O'Mac. Adley Rutschman clearly listened to yesterday's podcast. He went 2 for 4, hit his first career home run, added 3 RBI. Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
3 hard hit balls in this one. The one that wasn't hard hit, he hit 93 miles per hour. So that's a good sign.
I think the home run he hit came off of it was
off Barrios.
Off of Barrios.
He had a double and a home run off Barrios.
It's a pretty good pitcher to do it off of. So some signs of life for Adley Rutschman. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. went 4 for 5, hit his 16th home run. He had 3 batted balls of 115 miles per hour.
Yeah.
That is not supposed to happen. That is crazy.
Vlad had a hit on a 68 mile per hour exit velocity batted ball.
That's interesting. So far in the month of June, Vlad is hitting .333 with 7 home runs, 15 RBI in 14 games. He's very good. Teoscar Hernandez had a sock and a shoe, his 4th home run, his 3rd stolen base. His homer was 461 feet, and the buy low window has been slammed shut for Teoscar Hernandez. Alex Verdugo went 3 for 5 with his 4th homer. Rafi Devers went 1 for 3 with his 16th home run. Brian Reynolds went 2 for 3 with a triple and a homer. He's having a great June himself.
Missed your buy low window on that guy too.
404 batting average, 4 homers, 11 runs, 9 RBI. And the Braves, I mentioned, 14 wins in a row. Chris, since we're admitting defeat on a few players today, you and I were very wrong about Austin Riley. He went 3 for 5, 2 more homers. He is up to 18 home runs.
That's all right. I feel like I'm more, my brand is more tied to the anti-Nolan Arenado thing, and that one's looking better. So
yes. Yeah.
We'll just focus on that one.
All right. I'm going to delete that from the podcast side of things. We'll leave it on YouTube, but Nolan Arenado, he stinks again. Yeah. Let's talk more about that. Call to the bullpen for the Marlins. Cue the Tanner Scott meltdown. He gave up a walk-off 3-run homer to Garrett Stubbs. All right. Who knew? The Royals. Scott Barlow recorded the final 5 outs for his 7th save. His ERA is 1.63. He's pretty awesome. The problem, the Royals are not. The Yankees. Clay Holmes allowed 1 hit, but picked up his 11th save. And we mentioned earlier, David Bednar, final 8 outs for his 11th save of the season. To stream or not to stream, I mentioned yesterday, Thursday is very bad for streaming. I've got 2 names. Rich Hill versus Oakland and Tyler Wells at the Blue Jays. I agree. Friday, Zach Thompson.
Honestly, maybe Chad Kuhl. I might prefer Chad Kuhl against the Guardians to either of those guys.
Don't do it. Just don't.
Probably shouldn't. But if you're gonna ask me for one.
Speaking of the Guardians, if you have not seen Stephen Kwan's catch, his diving catch,
incredible
on the warning track, that was ridiculous. Friday, Zach Thompson versus the Giants, Ross Stripling versus the Yankees, Michael Wacha versus the Cardinals. Ooh, revenge game. John Gray at the Tigers, Daniel Lynch at the A's, Devin Smelter at the Diamondbacks, and Michael Lorenzen at the Mariners.
lock in John Gray. That's never gone poorly for fantasy players.
Yeah, the Tigers are just so bad. But you know what? Maybe they come out hot after this team meeting. I don't know. I feel like that's
And Daniel Lynch,
happens.
maybe that's mostly the Oakland thing.
I streamed Daniel Lynch in a 15-team league a couple weeks ago, and he was awful.
Yeah.
So that left a bad taste. Michael Lorenzen, I think, is okay at the Mariners.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.